Okay, so we're here for the Outlast one, literally just like 30 seconds later. Um, Now, as I explained in the very first video when I was starting Outlast, I pretty much watched all of Outlast. I watched multiple YouTubers play Outlast. However, my entire memory of that game, would not be like 100%. I would know where everything is, every little secret, every little hide spot. Just not going to happen. Um, Roughly, I'd say with a 20-minute piece, possibly maybe like 2 hours altogether, at 20 minutes of video, so 13 videos, do math there. Um, Outlast is one of those games that, for its time, was considered to be one of the most scariest games to actually come out. Uh, I will admit, it did give me a few random jump scares that I knew eventually the person or creature or whatever would pop out, but just because it makes you so relaxed with the ambient sounds and the white noises. You haven't seen any combat for like 15-20 minutes, so you let your guard down, then there's just that one random jump scare that just happens to pop out. I got a few of those in there. um, Dealing with Barbecue Sauce Man, Christopher, and then you had Father Martin, you had Dr. Traeger, and then you had the Wall Rider and stuff like that. Uh, it's one of my videos of Dr. Traeger. I did kind of make somewhat of a guide, and same thing with Christopher. Uh, More of like it's study the audio of the game so you know where their pathways are, when they're going to turn around, when they're stopping in this room, what activates them, stuff like that. So somewhat of a guide in my blind playthrough of Outlast. Uh, Neither one of those characters I was remotely afraid of because I knew their movements, study their patterns. They may be, first 5 minutes of the gameplay of me just, making a guide of, this person's going to take a left instead of a right, and they're going to double back and stuff like that. Story wise, good as always. It's never really made any sense to me, especially as a big horror fan as I am when it either comes to games. I prefer to watch them instead of playing them because watching so many horror movies through my entire life, some of the concept of the way that they design horror games doesn't make a lot of sense. For instance, it's like your character's a reporter going to this asylum. He has several chances before Christopher actually grabs him, like going in the room and then seeing the entire SWAT team is pretty much just taken out. Christopher has pretty much killed them all. And getting that, and then you go into the second part of it where he tries to squeeze through the bookshelf area, and Christopher, grabs him and throws him. Before that entire incident, he had enough video footage to show the world, to say, hey, this asylum is crazy, and a bunch of people dying here, there's a bunch of patients and stuff like that, and yet your character still proceeds to actually just go through the entire asylum and then eventually just dies in the end. It's really idiotic to me because in a real life scenario that would not happen. If you made it that far into that part of the library, seeing a bunch of dead people and decapitated heads and stuff like that on the bookshelves, your ass would have went back to the same window you crawled through and would have gotten back in your Jeep and took off. But your character just proceeds, what, I got thrown through this window and I'm stuck in this asylum building. I'm going to proceed to go further into it. And that's when you start to come across Father Martin, stuff like that, multiple opportunities. I do apologize. Multiple opportunities to actually escape in the courtyard, even though there is barbed wire fence and stuff like that, to be able to still crawl over it, get out of that area, even if it means you wander around the wilderness, going back to the beginning of the asylum to get the hell out of there. Your character does not do that. He continues to runs and hides from the killers of the goddamn game. And Father Martin, he's just a nut job as he is anyways, along with the rest of the patients. Christopher Walken's, or Chris Walker, I think it's Christopher Walken's. Chris Walker, he's just a complete psychopath who just got brainwashed to the point where he's just literally a walking monster. Then you had Dr. Traeger. That dude is a complete sociopath. He was basically one of the main reasons why everyone looked the way they actually looked in the asylum. Experimenting, testing on people, cutting them up, going like full hostile movie times 10. He was a nut job himself. being the whole concept, I believe the Outlast is basically based on a book of the author. Not like probably not real life events, but it is based on a book that they turned into a game, where the CIA was actually brainwashing people and trying to make sleeper cells and stuff like that, and their psychological experiments were going wrong till they started weeding people out like lab rats until they found the perfect specimen, and then they infused his mind with nanites, nanobots and stuff like that. To, eventually created the manifestation of the Wall Rider, so this ghost that's floating around, going around killing everyone, stuff like that. And you're stuck in an asylum trying to get this way, and then you have to deal with the twins and stuff like that, and it's just like, it's a whole goddamn thing. Thing of Outlast is it's very graphic, very sexually graphic. There's a lot of cursing, there's a lot of gore in there. If you're squeamish to blood or any form of violence or any of that type of stuff like that, Outlast is definitely not a game for you, because the last thing you want to do is be throwing up all over your desktop. There's a lot of jump scares in that game, like I said, because I've watched so much of it, I pretty much knew where almost every jump scare was and when it was going to actually happen. So it wasn't, too out of the box for me when it comes to horror games that I've actually watched. The last horror game we played on our channel was Resident Evil 7, even then I love that goddamn game. So when it comes to the rest of the Outlast games, I know there is an Outlast 3 in the workings. I don't know if it's official or not, but I know it is in the workings. And then you have Outlast 2. Outlast 2 I will not be playing. After watching the first one, Outlast 2 just didn't seem to pull me in. I don't know if the connection between these two stories was actually a thing, or they just went to two different stories. It just didn't have the same feel as Outlast 1. And then you have Outlast Trials, which is basically multiplayer. I have no idea what the hell that crap's about. I think that was just something to give people until Outlast 3 actually came out, which I believe is not supposed to come out to at least another 2 or 3 years. The other thing with Outlast, and actually makes a different comparison to games like Amnesia Dark Descent or Bay of Pigs and stuff like that, is your entire thing is really based around using a video cam. And once again it comes to horror movies, I hate horror movies that all you see is some random ass person carrying a video cam screaming their lungs off through the entire goddamn movie, like Cloverfield Lane or Cloverfield movie, what the hell it's called, the one they're using the goddamn video cam. I hate movies like that. It's very cringe and annoying to watch a movie like that. It's like, I'm already watching it through a screen. I don't need to watch it through another screen with someone who's got the jiggle arms, and they're trying to hold it steady while this monster's coming around, and then you throw in like that green night vision like Outlast does, and so then you can't see a damn thing except for like there's just wall of shadow in a tunnel or an empty hallway or some crap like that, and you can hear the creaking sounds of the creature walking around and shit. Outlast had that, but just more of a silent patience and stuff like that. Batteries in that goddamn game were going by extremely quick. I mean, if you get lucky enough, maybe 2 minutes worth of battery time before you have to change it out. I know there is like harder difficulties in that game. We chose the easiest one because it was our first time playing the game. I know in the harder difficulties, you are only allowed to use 2 batteries, I think, and the speed of them goes down even quicker. And I think enemies can actually one-shot you too. I believe I died, I want to say twice, if I remember. And one was to gravity for a jump that I thought you were supposed to make, but it wasn't. And I know it took me 3 times, because the second one was to Dr. Traeger when I was doing my guide, and they set up certain spawn points when you try to escape him that he'll just spawn in that one area once you pass another room. And I accidentally got cornered and he ended up killing me. And the other one was Wall Rider, who I didn't realize it was a back and forth game. Once they locked the doors, you had to run back, but you had to get past Wall Rider, and he can actually 2-shot you. So that was interesting. But if I had to give Outlast, my first time ever playing the game, a solid 10 out of 10 stars, I'd give it a solid 8.5. It wasn't the best horror game I ever played. It's always fun to watch people actually watch or actually play Outlast. Would I ever go and do another Outlast again, try to get all the files and all that crap? Probably not. Outlast is just one of those games I just wanted to put on my channel just to say I actually played it. Like I said, the whole camera thing is probably my biggest gripe with that game, because I do not like games or movies that do that, where they, you don't actually have to use the webcam, but if you're going to enter dark areas, you need it, so especially with the night vision and how fast your batteries drain and stuff like that. But also personal opinions that I do not like games where you have to hide or you die. When it comes to horror movies or horror games, I like it where you can actually fight back. That's personally just me. But yeah, you'll see these videos probably tomorrow, and then I'll start doing recordings for Diablo 2 tomorrow sometime. But either way, stay safe, healthy, and sanitized. Make sure to drop a like, subscribe in the comments below, share my videos, and I'll continue to keep you guys updated on the following games and stuff like that I might be interested in. Most of them are pretty heavy in gigabyte size, so like 10 to 15 plus gigabytes, which doesn't sound like to most people, but when you have really slow internet, trust me, it takes a while to download that shit. And but yeah, I'll see you guys then.